So, welcome to another episode of Yada Yada Boom. Robert, I am so glad to see you this beautiful day.
Is it
It is
beautiful there?
rainy. Nope,
Not.
it is rainy and dreary here. How's California?
It's in the 60s, a little windy, so it's cold for us.
So essentially, I feel horrible for
Yeah,
you. I don't.
sunny and
I don't feel.
sunny, windy, and only 62.
Well, it is rainy. We had about a foot of snow drop just a couple of days
I
ago,
know, I saw.
and now the temperatures are mid 40s and rain, which means almost all of that snow is gone and it's just a soggy, dreary mess. But welcome to Northern Illinois. It's
Yep.
fine. I won't complain too much about it. So, we discussed briefly something to talk about today, and we decided that how do you find your happiness? What have we discussed as things that we have found that have been used and things that we've experienced either personally or in our relationships? And then maybe we can talk a little bit about what we have done to overcome those or
Yep.
identify some better strategies and ways to overcome those. So I will ask you to start. What have you found either for yourself or in any of your relationships as things that have you've used maybe to make yourself happy in your past or your present?
Yeah, the first thing that came to mind when you mentioned this a few minutes ago was my many-year relationship with my ex-wife. We married when I just turned 19. I think I was 19 for about 6 weeks.
Wow.
So I just
You
turned
were
19.
young.
Yeah, I was really young. Um, haven't shared much of the early story with everybody, but I was married young, and I felt I felt a codependency. I think I wouldn't know that though, Kate, for many, many years. So my ex and I, we married when I was 18, we got divorced when I was around 25, got back together and married again when I was around 30, adopted the kids, and then she wanted a divorce again when I was like 48. And it was in my later years, like when I was around 48, when I kind of realized uh, what I was drawn to was a bit of a codependent relationship. I felt two real fundamental things. I felt first that I was measured by my house and my car and my wealth, things like that, because I always carried a chip on my shoulder that I didn't go to college, and I was rubbing elbows working with engineers, which was my intention to be an engineer, but working with engineers and MBAs, and I always felt less than. So by having stuff, I've got the Center Hall Colonial, an acre of land, and a beautiful pool, and a Volvo. I was very dependent on those material measures of success. Uh, but I would evolve too in life where I would take a job where I traveled a lot. And my ex, she wasn't very adventurous. And I really realized then after I would start to travel, see the world, literally the world, that we kind of had this weird codependent relationship where she depended on me and I felt manly, like I could take care of her. I
Oh.
felt like somebody needed me and I could take care of them. So I derived a lot of happiness from feeling needed and supporting
Okay.
and providing. So,
Oh, interesting. Okay. I love how we just start talking about this stuff because, oh, I'm learning something very new about you.
yeah,
So, when you are going through that, you recognize that maybe you set your foundation of happiness on status amongst your
good way
peers,
to
which
say it.
gave you
Yep.
which gave you a good feeling of I've arrived. I can hang with these people because I have this status by these monetary types of things. And then you also talk about a relationship with your ex where that desire to be needed at a high level brought you happiness because you were essentially providing something that you felt she couldn't provide for herself.
I, I think men are, I think men are socialized and raised to be fixers, but also, the
Okay.
man of the house. Remember, I'm level 62. When I say level 62, by the way, uh, Amma came up with this or heard it somewhere. Instead of saying I'm 62 years old, I've reached level 62. That is a lot cooler because that's really what we've reached. We've reached higher levels in life. Um, so you got to remember, I was raised in an era with that work ethic. I mean, 1974, women really couldn't even get credit without their husband. even if they were co-signed for something, they still had to have husband's permission for things. So I grew up with my grandmother and my mom in that type of society. So I think that kind of influenced me that it's my role to take care of somebody. But it also
Okay.
made me feel really important. I think psychologically also stunted because I was tiny. I'm not that small. I'm not a big guy. I mean, I'm not a physically imposing person, but I'm about average, 5'11 ish, 180 pounds in that range. But as a kid entering high school, 10th grade, I was 5'1", 105 pounds, scrawny little arms. And taking care of somebody made me feel masculine, made me feel manly. So
Okay.
that's where that came from in some respects. But also I
Interesting.
think just the way men were and still are socialized.
Yeah. I think there's a lot to that too. So I like understanding like where you derived that happiness from. And I'll delve into that kind of stuff for myself in a minute, but I would like to ask, now that you have, of course, first of all, you got married when your brain wasn't formed fully yet. So those first years having that codependent type of relationship where you were providing and you felt very needed and you showed up in
Yeah.
it in a different way. As you grew and as you really started to understand yourself, which I'm a firm believer, once you start to hit those 40s, somewhere in there, you really begin to know who you are. And I think the growing up years have finally gotten to a point where you're like, okay, I kind of understand this life thing. I'm still going to figure out some of it. Um, what do you derive your happiness from now? Is it still extrinsic kinds of stuff or is it more intrinsic?
I think it's definitely more intrinsic. It's a sense of serving, and it's a sense of using my voice to create change. And that can be in the business world. That can be just using my voice and my influence and my 36 years of doing this to help a customer, a distributor get what they need. So again, it goes back to some of what I said earlier. There's that codependency feeling needed. But I derive a lot of satisfaction from helping and assisting and mentoring. I've mentored 4 different women through Women in Electronics. That's been really, really satisfying. And the takeaway there was when I was younger, it was kind of like, let me show you how much knowledge I have and how hard I work and how fast I work and I'm going to upstage everybody. And now it's kind of like, let me share all of this and try to take all this concentrated knowledge and download it into people that I work with that are newer in the business and help them get up to speed quicker. So they don't have to wait till they're in their 40s to gain some of this knowledge and skill and so forth. I firmly believe if people have reasonable intelligence and they have the same base of knowledge as me, they'll make similar decisions. So they can make business decisions quickly, similar to how I'd make a decision. So that's probably a really big motivator. Mindfulness is a huge strategy for me. I turned toward Buddhism in my late 40s. When I got divorced the second time, the first time I was married to the same woman twice. First divorce wasn't too acrimonious. We didn't really have a lot. We had a house, but we didn't have a lot to fight over. We fought over the dogs. Um, and the second marriage, she hired a divorce lawyer, and I'm sure she had women chirping in her ear. I mean, literally, they were trying to do forensic uh, financial analysis on me. Her friends had convinced her I was stashing money somewhere. I was a W-2
Yep.
employee, traveling constantly. I didn't have a side gig, so it was pretty contentious, financially ruinous, and I realized that I had within me a chance to really hate the world and women as a result of this because again, a lot of my self-worth was tied up in the home that I had to sell. I went from being a homeowner from age 18 to age 48 to having to move back into an apartment. So mindfulness is huge for me and knowing that I'm more in touch with what are those feelings inside me and why are they bubbling up and is it ego? Is it pride? Is it an insecurity? Is it the imposter syndrome? Being aware of those things and feeling like I have more control is pretty empowering to me.
That
How
is
about you?
fabulous.
Because
Yeah.
you came from a point of your own self-worth issues, I guess. I'm assuming that based on what we've talked about before, but I know you struggled with weight your entire life and you had your own battles and demons there. So anything
Right.
similar?
Well, fun that you should ask. So, really, like growing up and things like that, my father was the provider for a while until he became injured
Hmm.
on the job. And my
Police
mother
officer,
had
you
to, he was
told
a police
people.
officer, right? And so my mom had to step up because my father was not able to work anymore. So she became the provider. And I think a lot of, I mean, it's very small brain when you start seeing this to happen, is I became like you were. You're like, okay, I take pride in being able to take care of people.
Right.
I take, like, it brings me happiness to nurture and be the one that takes care of because I'm needed,
Right.
which probably, like, now that we're sitting here talking about it, I'm like, okay, that makes sense that I was raised where, yes, it was in the 70s. Women stayed home with the kids, the men went out to work until, the roles had reversed. And it put a
Right.
lot on my mom's shoulders. I know because, of course, she wasn't making as much money as the men were. She had to work twice as hard. Not only was she doing her full-time teaching position, but then she's coming home to young children and caring for, a man who couldn't care for himself through all of the surgeries that were going on.
Oh, wow.
And so watching that really led me, I think, down a path of I really truly do get happiness and fulfillment by helping others. I think it really has played into who I've become, as an adult. Um, but going through all of those years of what I saw as selflessness was putting everybody else first, and then I was last, which turned into a lot of behaviors that, and I still catch myself where I do take care of other people, or I put their needs or their desires or their happiness in
Right.
front of my own because I can handle it and I see things. I'm very intuitive and empathetic with those around me, and I can feel vibrations off of people, and I know when to pull back and when I can push forward. And so recognizing these different traits of people, recognizing what's in me, I have found that I have to find that balance of happiness, is that I cannot change people unless they want to change themselves. But if I can provide, like you found,
Right.
when you can transfer knowledge that they're seeking, that's going to help them, that brings me some happiness. But over, the years, as I really started to learn myself, I still, I still catch myself sometimes pulling happiness from outside sources, or when I'm not focused in my intrinsic stuff, because I can very quickly, case in point, I know I'm all over the place. I was having a conversation with my neighbor last night, and she's like, sometimes it's hard to be friends with you. I was like, what do you mean?
Really?
What does that mean? I'm not quite sure what that means. And she's like, you are so able to just make everything seem easy and happy and energetic, and you're always just so happy. She's like, I like it when you share when you're not. And I thought that was a very profound moment,
Right.
like in that conversation, because it took me years to get to the point where I was actually able to do that for myself. I can do it in a split second. I see myself go below the line. Okay, this is just normal human behavior, is to fall into maybe victimhood, or victim, villain, hero. Okay.
Okay.
And over time, I have taught myself to catch myself in that. And there's like this shift and this drift where I can bring myself back above the line and be my own, I guess, just get out of that little habit cycle or that rumination in your brain. So I was like, okay, I have all the human emotions, as all of us do, right? I've just caught myself in those moments where I'm just like, oh, woe is me. And I'm like, where's that coming from? What can I control out of that? And the answer is always myself. And so am I going to learn how to respond to this situation in a positive way and figure out this thing is happening for me versus to me? And then how do I move forward? I always put action behind something. So I might feel sad about something that's going on. I am able to very quickly, most of the time, talk myself through it and be like, okay, where's that coming from? Why do I feel this way?
Hmm.
What can I do differently? And I guess I don't share that process because it's all happening upstairs,
Yeah.
usually in a quiet, place. And it happens very quickly now because I've practiced it for 8, 9, 10 years. And so I just thought that was very interesting that she said that to me yesterday. And I was just like, oh, because I had shared with her, I'm like, I'm a little sad today. like this is how I'm feeling. And I just want to
Right.
get that out because usually I just close down and I take care of it myself. But she was there and I was like, I just right now. And
Well,
she's like, oh my gosh, I can relate to you now. And I was just like,
uh,
oh, I'm very relatable. It's just I work through it differently than others. So leveling up my happiness intrinsically, that's how I do it, no matter what's going on around me. Um, but to bring it all back, because I know I'm just jabbering on and on.
that's the yada yada part.
It's the yada yada part. There's a lot of yada yada. We
Hmm.
talked about how I think I'm Italian. I'm talking with my
Yeah,
hands.
yeah.
I just grew up in an Italian neighborhood. I'm really not Italian. Uh, so, needless to say, getting back to the question that you had for me of how have I noticed my happiness or whatever happening is I witnessed a lot of things that made me that nurturer and giver and how I felt my worth was just giving of myself all of the time. Now that I've really started to recognize I can give to myself first, and that is the most important thing of my day, so that I can best give to others at a high level. I think that's like the biggest shift that I have had in the intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation of happiness for me is take care of me first, put
Right.
on my oxygen mask, and then I'm better able to still give of myself at a very, like, I give a lot of myself. I really do. But I'm taking care of me first most of the time. I'm still in process.
Yeah,
But
I've only known you uh when I moved to Rockford 11, 12, 13 years ago. I can't remember what it was.
right.
But I've only known you through that time. When I met you, you were a very successful Mary Kay entrepreneur. And then you would later become even more successful as somebody in health and nutrition coaching. But I've only known that positive side. And I guess there's some people who think that, and I get some similar comments, kind of like, you live you present a sanitized image. And that's not true, for sure. I try not to. This is a damn it doll. I think we might have shown that.
God damn
And
it, doll. I
yeah,
want one so
and it's
bad.
right there because that temper that I carried was, it's still right there. And let Excel lock up on one of my big files, and whoa, it's coming. The damn it doll is going to work. I slap that against the table. And then the F bombs start flying. So people will say to me, you're so calm. You don't seem like anybody who lets anything bother them. And even my daughter would say, Dad, the big things don't bother you, but the little things, wow, you're kind of like off the rails. And I was talking about episode 3, which had some technical difficulties, figured them out, and just produced that. I'm going to drop that any day now. I was flat. The way I looked at it, I was flat. And I still feel I'm holding myself back because I've been told I'm too much for people. I've been told I'm
Yes.
too much. That's part of the reason I went to the nickname Bob. Somebody told me way, way back when I kind of had started in the work field. Robert Derringer's too stern a name, and you're too stern a person. You go with Bob, it'll soften things. Now, I mean, I went with Bob anyway through high school, but I thought in business I should be Robert. No, no, that's too much. Actually, I ran for office, and I ran for office when I was 20 years old, and people told me then, go with Bob, not Robert. It's, you're too serious. So I've always had that kind of serious streak. I'm not somebody who smiles a whole lot. It just, I don't know, my face just doesn't do it. But I don't have a lot of wrinkles as a result, so that's good. Um, but I can be a lot more animated, enthusiastic, and more fun than people realize. But sometimes I don't show it, Kate. So I'm using this
I've
podcast as a
seen it.
learning curve. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I think of my son. I call it, what would Garrett do? And he is like just so full of energy. And he's like, dude, dude, dude. I see him on these podcasts that he does, and he's like, come on, dude, come on, really, really, dude. I'm not that.
No.
That wouldn't be me. That would be
That's
phony.
disingenuous to who you are as a
But yeah,
person.
I
Yeah.
have terrible days. That the recording of episode 3, I was just really feeling down. My back was
Yeah.
aching, and I just was like, I don't want to do anything. Whoa, it's me. But when
Right.
I used to, my temper was partly to what you talked about. By not taking care of yourself and worrying about how much. You, Let me say it another way. By not trying to be incrementally better as a person every day, but trying to get incrementally more stuff, that puts a lot of pressure on you.
Yes.
especially when you feel the guilt of traveling a lot. I would log 120,000 air miles a year. My kids were being raised by my ex. She didn't work for most of the time, and I would feel really guilty. And I'm not sure she listens to this and wouldn't like me to say this, but I think it's completely true. She derives a lot of satisfaction out of stuff, a new piece of furniture, new TV, something, new kitchen. And we had crushing credit card debt. And
Mm,
I would out of, guilt that I traveled so much say, yeah, we can't really afford it. Like we can't pay cash, but can we cover the monthly
mm,
payment? Yeah.
mm-hmm.
But we were right on the edge. I made good money, but we were right on the edge all the
Right.
time, virtually living paycheck to paycheck. And it created a tremendous amount of stress because I took on the burden of I'm going to carry the family on my own, and yet the debt was off the charts. We had a house, we had a second mortgage, we had crap load of credit card debt. So yeah, I'm certainly not perfect, but now for me, I'm not stressed to try to drive, a number or a result financially. When I was saying when I got divorced the second time, I just going to meditation was a huge step for me, just going to meditation because I didn't think I could shut up for 30 minutes. That was one thing. But also going to therapy was a huge step.
Yes.
I went to therapy and I was like, you don't need therapy. You can figure it all out yourself. That's for the weak. But going, just admitting, I guess it's like AA, admitting you have a problem. So I would go to therapy. I would eventually turn toward kind of Buddhism light, more the mindfulness side of it. And it was really important and helpful for me. But I remember when I started dating again after I got divorced, it would have been right around 2010. I had this little Ford Focus, I think, used Ford Focus. I had a Volvo before that. And I decided, I should go out and get a Lexus, used a Lexus, an Infinity, Acura, something. So when I do go on a date, women will see me and my role and my job and the car, and it'll all line up. And I said, no, I'm not doing that. First, I can't afford it. I was paying child support for two kids, alimony, and credit cards that we had built up. But secondly, I said, I don't really want to connect with somebody who's hung up on my material status in life. If they could really care that much about a car I'm driving, I don't care anymore. But I wasn't that person for many, many years of my life. I knew I was as smart as the college educated folks I was working with. I could hang with them on a lot of engineering topics. Now, I wasn't an engineer, but I could talk about most of the things that engineers talked about. And I could talk about the things that the MBA people talked about. And I could train a lot of MBA people on how to do a pivot table and how to do lookup functions in Excel and how to analyze data with the best of them. But I didn't have their degrees. So again, I had to make it up in a different way. And it would be later in life that I finally started to realize that really wasn't that important. Trying to be a better person, incrementally better, a step at a time is really what I try to do. It's not just a little tagline because it sounds cool. It is really what I try to do. And I
Right.
don't, when I lose my cool, which I still do, not to the degree and not certainly as frequent, but when I do lose my cool, I don't beat myself up. And I also don't blame other people. That was a big thing. I would
Ooh,
not only beat
good.
myself up for internally, I knew I was better than this and capable and shouldn't be losing my cool, but I would always blame somebody else for doing it. They cut me
Mm,
off. They said this. They
right.
reacted a certain way that caused me to lose my shit. And it's not,
Nope. It's all you.
what bothers me doesn't bother other people.
Yes.
And why is that? It's because I'm letting it bother me. And
Yeah.
I really I'm pretty good now at not just suppressing and like covering up those things so that they're suppressed and tamped down. It's kind of like certain things just don't bother me. Anyway, that's my little
Well, that's
spin off.
kind of fun to look at. Like, so the materialistic side of things, I don't really want to call it materialistic because it is okay to want to achieve. It is okay to want to have certain things that make your life more comfortable, in my opinion. And I don't really think it has to do with necessary monetary types of things, but when you are trying to impress people because of what you think they think about you,
Yep.
that's where that downward spiral can kind of
It's
happen.
it's about intention, isn't it?
So,
If
but
your
when it
intention
really
is
comes
wrong,
down, if your intention is wrong, then it's not going to benefit you in any way. I firmly have, like, let's be real, over many, many years have gotten to the point where I don't care as much of what people think about me or my lifestyle, what I have or what I don't have. I just want them to know me as a person. If they know my heart and if they truly want to know me, the house that I live in and the car that I drive and that kind of stuff shouldn't matter. Mind you, I do drive a Volvo.
I remembered that. Yeah.
I
But you live in that Volvo some days and work from it.
it is my mobile. I spend a lot of time in my car, whether it
Yeah.
is transferring children around. I do work from my car. I drive. I'm constantly in my car.
Right.
And when it was time for my daughter to start driving at the age of 16, I was driving a minivan. Thank you, Town and Country. That was a nice minivan.
Yeah.
And it served me very well. And my daughter really wanted the minivan. That's how great this minivan was. And so I gave her my minivan. I'm like, well, if I'm going to get something for myself, I want to make sure that it's something that's safe and comfortable and reliable.
Yep.
And so when I started to do the research, I went for the car that is the safest, most reliable that I could find and afford. And I will tell you what, I am not sad about it.
Right.
And there are a lot of people, I really didn't recognize like a status level of a Volvo. I was just like, oh, Swedish car, Swedish. I love this idea. And I went and I sat, I drove. I'm like, this is absolutely the car that I want.
Yeah.
And I bought it for myself. Okay. Now, mind you, I did it for myself. It wasn't with anybody, it was for me. I work hard. I deserve to get what I want. I'm now recognizing apparently this is a status symbol because I have a lot of people that come like, oh, you have a Volvo. And I'm like, yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, I don't know. I apparently it's a great car. I don't even know how to work half the things on it. I can anyway. My house, on the other hand, I have lived here for 23 years. I've lived in this house.
Oh,
This
wow.
was a starter home. It is in a very low middle class type of a neighborhood. We did put an addition on it at one point, so we did double the size of the home. And I'm just comfortable here. I have the most amazing of neighbors that have been friends for years and years and years. It is a very generational type of a neighborhood where the parents lived there and then the kids bought 3 houses down and then it just keeps moving through the same families, even though it's this really small, little, tiny house neighborhood. And I will tell you, there are times I'm incredibly embarrassed to have people because they all have McMansions.
Right.
And here I am in this house. And then I sit back and I think about it. I'm like, yes, I would love to have more land. I would love to have more, square footage. I would love to have a better neighborhood. And then when it comes down to it, I'm like, I am so safe here. My best friend, my neighbor and I across the street are great friends where we help each other out all the time.
Right.
All the time. You want to let the dog out, you want to do what you just take care of each other. And the people that know me and love me and know who I am at my heart could care less what my house is.
Right.
And I can go and I can do different things because my house payment is not putting me into debt. I don't have the second mortgage. I don't have all of that. I'm able to live a lifestyle that I want to live and I still have my Volvo. So
Yep.
I don't know where we're going with this, but
Well,
that
I
is,
think, for me, material possessions are nice and can be appreciated, but we shouldn't let them define us.
yes.
And we should never use them as a way of judging others or judging ourselves. I know we're coming close to the 30 minutes that we allocate to this, but I remember when we moved from Connecticut to New Jersey. Now, I don't think I'll ever live 23 years in the same place. I never have. I've probably lived
Right.
in 20 some houses, 25.
Insane.
Amma too. Amma and I have lived in 7 together, I think, 6 or 7.
Wow.
13 years we've been together. So it's kind of crazy. we moved. I chased jobs. I chased money. We moved from Pennsylvania to Connecticut to another place in Connecticut. And my ex wasn't very happy. She said she wanted to be closer to home. Now, mind you, Connecticut was 4 hours by car. It wasn't that far. And then we moved closer to like 3 hours away. But she wanted to be closer. And I had a job offer to go to central New Jersey, which was about an hour and 20 minutes from where we were raised. And it made sense. It gave me a global position, gave me opportunity to get over to Asia, where in the 2000s, in the early 2000s, everything was happening in Asia. So I thought I really need to understand this market. It was a good career move, and it turns out it was a good career move. So we moved to Central Jersey. It was a hot market when we moved in 2002, 2003. One of those markets where people are coming in like they still are, especially like they were 2 years ago, coming in, making bids over offer. You were having to move quickly. So I came in, looked at a house, and it wasn't exactly what we had in mind. We had in mind the big open concept with the 9-foot ceilings, but it had an amazing yard. It had space for a pool, and it was a lower price, so I knew we could afford to put in a pool that had this amazing backyard with this on this 1 acre lot. But it was traditional, dining room, living room, open
Right.
foyer, but a little more boxy than these newer homes that were being built in the area. So told my ex, also the kitchen was pretty beat. So I said, look, we're going to be able to afford to put a new kitchen in and a pool. And she was like, hey, if you think it's a good decision, then do it. So we did, made an offer. She came down the next weekend and said, I really don't like it. I said, well, look, we still have, we could find a way out. There's still things, inspections, there's ways out. She's like, no, I mean, I don't really like it. A year later, after we're in there, and I really wish we would have bought the other house. And she would constantly do that. And I said one day to her, I just watched like a National Geo thing or something on TV, and it was U.S. Army Corps of Engineer was like in Tibet or Nepal or something, and they were helping these people who lived in the mountains there make their own natural gas. So there's a woman, she rolls up her skirt and she goes in this big cistern like thing, and there's all these oxen and things that they also have, and they take all the poop and put it in this big concrete thing, and she goes in and hand stirs it around, and then covers it back up. And it's like, we can cook. I used to walk 3 hours to go pick up a bunch of sticks and 3 hours back. And then I, heat up and cook something. And now I just have this flame and I can cook. And I said, I told her that story, and I said, there'd be a lot of people that would be pretty happy to be in a house like this. And I told her this story, and she says, well, then go marry some bitch in a burqa. Needless to say, communication was not the strong suit that my ex and I had. And that was incrementally better, was not really something, those weren't two words that went together in our household at that time. But I had been going down a kind of a path in my mind, spiritually and so forth, where I was trying to evolve. I was seeing a different world because I was traveling the world.
Right.
And she just really resisted that, and we had kind of just grown apart. So we didn't have a cancerous relationship. We had a benign relationship, and she wanted to be divorced again. And like I said, it was financially ruinous. But those are my takeaways on all of that, is that we had a pretty damn nice house in central New Jersey, 4-bedroom colonial house on an acre of land. And she just wasn't happy because some of Garrett's friends had these big McMansions, and she
Yeah.
wanted the McMansion. And then they had the big 8-foot long cast iron or a stainless steel barbecue grill. And then the next, there were these two friends that always competed, and
Yep.
she just wanted to compete with them. And it's like, we
Yeah.
can't. I mean, we just
Keeping up
can't.
with the Joneses is really, really difficult. And when you start to find that happiness with those types of things, she just wasn't happy at the time. Whatever the circumstance may be, that is where she was deriving her happiness, was that status symbol of, I want to keep up with these people and then I'm going to be happy. That next new thing, and I'm
And
going to be
and I want to be
happy.
fair. I want to be fair to her. She's not here to
Right.
represent herself. I want to be fair and say, look, I was emotionally very distant.
Yeah.
Um, we weren't intimate for years. I was a really good runner, and I used running
That's
as
your.
kind of an escape. That was my
Mhm.
place out. So I recognize that I was emotionally distant. I was a great provider and we were good parents. As a couple, we had just drifted apart. So I understand why she
Right.
felt somewhat alone, and
Right.
I traveled a lot. So I mean, I get all that, but what I didn't get at the time was, why aren't we going to go to therapy and try to keep our kids, who are like 16 and 12 ish? Why aren't we going to try to keep this family together at least for a while till we get them through school? Um, it wasn't, like I said, it was a benign, not malignant
Right.
relationship. There's no abuse or anything like that.
Right.
But am I glad that I'm out of it? Yeah, I'm
Yes.
glad I would eventually meet Ama and be in the relationship I'm in and be able to kind of explore more about who I am. And
Yeah. I'm a firm believer of things don't happen to you. And many, many people are like, oh my gosh, this happened to me. This sickness happened to me. This divorce happened to me. And in all reality, when you're going through it, it does
yeah,
sometimes feel like that. But when you kind of get past the mess and when you get past some of the trauma that can happen during those times, you recognize it actually happened for you, if you so choose. And
right.
when you can look back at those things and you can say, what good came of this? What happiness derived, from these situations? How can I use this as a catalyst for change for myself? Making yourself a better human, incrementally getting better, 1% at
Yeah,
a time. I have a lot of experience, in that as well. And I'm still going through some of it, but I'm recognizing every single day that I am a better be because of everything that
right.
is still going on. And so I think this is a good point for us to just kind of cut this
Absolutely.
and say, we are becoming better. And as long as we find that intrinsic motivation to find our happiness and we're not looking to others to provide that for us, I think we're in a pretty darn good place.
Yeah, 100%. So we'll keep humaning at a higher level and be a little better, incrementally better every day.
I love it. Fantastic.